This astaxanthin supplement, I hear it's 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, 100 times stronger than vitamin E, and 800 times stronger than CoQ10?
Yes, astaxanthin supports joint health, memory health, even anti-aging and immune health. This Hawaii brand delivers 3 times more nature-identical astaxanthin to your body and is a better buy than the competition. It's called Xanthicin. Safely manage your inflammatory health with Xanthicin. It's pure and highly absorbed, providing greater benefits. Visit getxantho.com and these retailers.
All right, how's it going, everybody? We welcome you to another edition of Hawai'i Football Now, presented by Xanthicin. That's right, we got some sponsors, Hunter. Mahalo also to our other sponsor, Spectrum Mobile. It's episode 9. We are already into basically the last quarter of the University of Hawaii football season. A lot to get to as we recap Hawaii's loss on the road at Utah State and a big home game coming up against nationally ranked San Diego State this coming Saturday. Jordan Helle, Hunter Hughes back with you. And Hunter, as we dive into this, a little opening drive, first impression, Utah State has had Hawaii's number for whatever reason. They've kind of owned the Bows over the last 10 years through 3 different head coaches, really 4 different head coaches, I think, if you go all the way back to 2011. And so I don't know if you can really piece together anything, but they've also had some rough results in Logan, Utah. And so kind of going back to your playing days, what do you think was kind of the toughest road environment to go and play in or get a dub in conference in particular?
Yeah, I mean, coincidentally, it looks like we haven't gotten it done the last, few years at Utah State, but the first and foremost I think of is Boise. I don't know if we've ever won on the blue field, ever. To my recollection, I can't remember any. And then outside of that, anytime we play Fresno, anytime, whether it be at home, away, conference capabilities or not, it's always tough at Fresno. And then who we've got this week, Jordan, San Diego State. Their level of professionalism is always tough. And in that same vein, I think of Air Force. Air Force is always a tough ask with how disciplined they are from top to bottom. So those are a few right there. But yeah, man, I don't know what it is with going to Logan. They seem to have our number for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned a handful of those, but really the bulk coming from the Mountain Time Zone, right? And it's never easy to travel to the continent, but then you got to go the extra little bit to get into Boise or Logan or Colorado Springs to go play the Air Force Academy. It's always a little tough. And for whatever reason, Logan has been a bugaboo for the University of Hawaii and even at home against the Aggies from Utah State. So, all right, let's dive into that. Let's kind of get into the nitty gritty right away. Another bad first quarter leaves a real tough showing, on the road, a 51-31 defeat in Logan. Hawaii now 4-5 on the season with just 4 games left, needing to go 3-1 to get to bowl eligibility. We'll get to that a little bit later on in this episode. They were down 14-0 right out of the gate in the first quarter. In 5 road games now, they've been outscored 65-20 in the first quarter. It was only 20-10 at halftime. They started chipping away. They had opportunities in the first half, even though they didn't really play all that well the first 30 minutes. But this game was basically decided first half of the third quarter, where Utah State goes on a 21-point scoring binge to stretch what was a 20-10 halftime deficit, as we mentioned, to 41-10 at one point, right? Hawaii ends up cutting it to 13. We can get into some of the developments here in just a second, but some big takeaways for you, Hunter, in a performance that didn't quite line up with what we had been seeing from this team over the last handful of games.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've talked about at length on this podcast for our true listeners out there, we've established that we are a run-first team and very much prolific on the run game. We've had multiple guys crack the 150 mark in many games this season. Of course, Calvin Turner's kind of our stud on the offense, both running and passing. The injury with Day Hunter obviously hurts, but then Dedrick Parson coming up and making his presence known the last couple games in relief of Day Hunter. And man, Jordan, I'm looking at it right now. We only ran the ball 22 times. That doesn't sound like a run first team right there. It seems that we've kind of shifted back into this, well, we're going to try a little bit of this and then a little bit of that. We need an identity if we're going to be successful. And I thought that, at least from observing and talking with some of the guys on the team, getting a feeling for what's working, that the run game was kind of where we were headed with that. And at least from a play calling perspective, doesn't look like they were supporting that or wanting to get that accomplished over there. I know this is the second game back with Chevin, somewhat healthy, at least from what we could tell. He was out there. I was impressed with some of the balls that he threw. I can't really put my finger on why they kind of made that shift to get away from the running game.
Yeah, it's interesting. Something I noticed as well. And you could argue that, hey, look, they go down big, right? And so you're not really going to stick to your power running game. But I think we saw signs of that in the first half as well, where maybe they were throwing the football a little bit more than we had seen. You think back to what they started on the road against Nevada, where it was very much punch you in the mouth, rushing football, right? Even outside of the long Day Hunter runs, but they were coming at them with the physicality. And then similar recipe against a much lesser opponent, obviously, a couple of weeks ago at home against New Mexico State. And so I kind of wondered and wanted to ask you about this, Hunter, and we can get into this right now. But, with Chevin Cordero back in the lineup, it had been, an offense that I think, didn't quite have a firm identity. I would agree that he should be the starter. I think he is the better option right now. But with Braden Shager in there, it seemed like it almost pigeonholed Hawaii offensively into a situation where it's like, look, we're not going to ride the freshman, right? And so what we're going to do is ride that offensive line and the running back core. But with Chevin in there, it almost seemed like they didn't have the same sort of recipe in terms of what they were trying to do to attack.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. At least from what I've observed, Brendan Shager's got a very powerful arm, very quick release. For those that I've talked to on the team, he can spin the football. He's a talented quarterback. Anytime that you put a freshman in there, though, they're young, they're inexperienced. I could kind of see it in his eyes, just reading his body language whenever we were on the sideline this last week. He hasn't had enough experience yet to rise into that kind of leadership role that is required of playing quarterback at University of Hawaii. And I think Chevin is definitely still that for our team. I think Chevin offers a little bit more versatility. Definitely with the run game first half of the season and all of last year, he was our leading rusher. The read option's a big part of kind of our play calling and how we try to get the ball down the field a little bit. But I didn't see a whole lot of that, Jordan. So yeah, I'm I really wish I had a little bit more to point to for our audience, but I was a little puzzled, man, to say the least. Anything else, though, we have got to get it done in the first quarter. We can't let a team like Utah State jump out to an early lead, because they proved it in the second and really a lot of the third quarter that we didn't belong in the same field as those guys. They were clearly one of the best teams in the Mountain West, and it shows with their record, obviously. But their level of play was nothing that we could touch.
Yeah, and so, they end up running for 51 total yards. And again, that includes sack yardage. But just on 22 attempts, you did have some musical chairs on the offensive line, right? Solo Vaipulu returns from injury. He gets the start at right guard. Iliki Tanuvasa had done a marvelous job really filling in there. And honestly, that offensive line is maybe playing its best football.
Yep.
Especially in run blocking with him out there. He did rotate in a little bit, but then it looked like he got a little banged up in the third quarter. I don't know if we really saw him in the fourth quarter. Not sure what his status is. Cole Val had to come out for a series, I believe, and we had like the third string center in there basically, because Tanuvasa is the backup center if necessary. We had a third string left tackle in at one point. Like Il Manning had to go out, not for long, but he was not in action for a few plays. And then, you had multiple false starts. I think 3 of them just alone on Vaipulu. And so it was just very disjointed up front. There was pressure in the backfield way too often. Utah State with 5 sacks in the ball game. Punahou grad Hale Motuapuaka was everywhere. He was making his presence felt right out the gate with some plays on that first drive. He ended up with a sack and a half, 1.5 of those 5 total sacks. And so, there were elements to this, right? When we talk about that offensive line, Chevan Cordero ends up going 23 of 39, 296 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Braden Shager comes in after the big shot that Cordero takes late in the ball game. He ends up going 4 for 7, 52 yards, had an interception on the very first pass he threw. And, Dedrick Parson, Calvin Turner, really nothing going in the running game. But it's so interesting because those two guys combined for 15 catches. Parson had 7 receptions, 115 yards through the air. And I would argue that between Chevan Cordero and Calvin Turner, that connection through the air probably looked as fluid as we have seen, in my opinion, really at any point throughout the season, with Calvin as that receiver. It had looked a little disjointed, but he went 8 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. And so it's a little head scratching as to some areas shining, some areas taking a massive step backwards. The other touchdown catch came from Kwali Nishigaya, who scored on his 1 reception. And then we never really saw him. At least I didn't see him out there much after the touchdown catch. So yeah, just offensively, it was a kind of a mess and just so disjointed because it wasn't a total failure, right? We talk about the running backs and Parson and then Turner, who's this slash guy, right? Who were terrific catching the football, right? And you saw some sparks from guys like Jared Smart and Nishigaya, and Nick Marner had some opportunities, but like 3 deep balls that could have resulted in points were, I think, a combined 18 inches away from being caught, just overthrown, or maybe just out of his reach. And so it kind of leaves you scratching your head again, right? Because we seem to revisit this every week where it's like, okay, there are clearly elements that they can build off of. There's clearly talent. But again, it just disjointed comes to mind as a way to kind of describe what we're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, you used the word I was going to use, was messy. It was kind of a messy game on both sides of the football. You got the pick that bounced off of the Utah State helmet in our end zone that should have probably been a touchdown. The multiple fumbles for us. I know we'll get to this later. The onside kick late in the fourth quarter that we let them return for a touchdown. And then, not to mention all of the false starts, some of the clock management scenarios that you and I had been talking about earlier as well. It kind of just, in light of what you were just saying with Calvin Turner and Dedrick Parsons being prolific in the passing game too, it seems like our team is kind of duct taped together. Like they're trying their best to keep the ship from sinking. And every once in a while, whether you have an unbelievable effort like a guy like Corey Bethley on defense, or a Darius Muasau, or Calvin Turner to pull magic out of the hat like he always does, it seems like it takes either a heroic effort or just the heart of the team to will us to victory. Because schematically, personnel wise, and management, it's been subpar. And I'm trying to be fair here. I feel like that is a pretty accurate read on what's been happening with the team. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think, Hunter, I think it shows up in multiple phases of the game, right? We spent some time talking about offense, wanted to get into the defense a little bit, right? Because this defense, where Todd Graham, that's his background, right? And they had been playing better. I think it's fair to say this group had looked like they were piecing it together. And then this game, it didn't look good at all, right? There were missed tackles, that initial drive, and even from some of the guys you usually count on, right? Darius Muasau had a key missed tackle on that first drive that ends up resulting in points later on in that possession. And you had some deep balls that just inexcusable, right? Misplays. Kai Kaneshiro and we saw Eugene Ford, the safeties, I think did not have a good game, right? And whether
Marner
it's
didn't show up.
Bad angles or misjudgments, and yeah, Nick Marner, he's a guy that we had come to, really expect some big things from, and because he had shown it, and this game, there were just a few where it's like, you want him to come down with those, and so they come up in different areas, right? And special teams, and that's something that you and I wanted to get into as well, and just how subpar that has been at times, and so yeah, I like the duct tape analogy, right? Because it seems like they've got ideas, and a lot of them aren't bad ideas, but they just haven't been able to kind of mold it and get everything moving in the right direction.
And the effort is there.
Yeah, they play hard, right? That's always a good start. They've had moments, but it just doesn't piece together week in and week out over 4 quarters, right? Even in some of the games where we saw them start really slow, they played a lot better. The Oregon State game in the middle portion, right? You think back to some of these others. And so, yeah, it's just head scratching in that, because you are 9 games in, right? And so at this point, you kind of are what you are. Mm-hmm. And I think this is sort of the grade on the team, is that it's just a work in progress where it hasn't quite come together yet. And for you, Hunter, what do you think of some of those defensive miscues and in large part coming off the heels of some pretty solid performances from this group?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to look at the season as a whole, the first couple of games, it looked like we didn't have an answer for the running game. It looked like teams could run through us like tissue paper without even skipping a beat. Looked like they tightened the screws on that pretty stinking well. Especially with some of the shutdown games. I think of Fresno right off the bat, at least the first half of the Nevada game too, with a prolific running attack that Nevada has. But at least this past weekend, I should say, Utah State looked like they could do it any way they wanted to against us. Down the field, up the middle. Some of those screen concepts, I mean, they were literally walking into the end zone with no one 20 yards to the guy with the football. So it was clear that that Utah State is a championship contender this year, and Hawaii is not. We've had some special moments this far in this season, the 9 games that we've had so far. But I mean, I'm looking at the Mountain West rankings right now, and I can't say that we deserve to be much higher than where we're at, Jordan, which is, second to last on the west side of our conference, and right there in the same category with the UNLVs, the New Mexicos and Wyoming, who in some ways has kind of given up in some of the reads that I've been looking at, how they're holding their program together over there. I don't know what's happening over there, but for all of us that are support of Hawaii Football Nation, we have nothing but love for the boys. It's been a tough year. And there's been some high points for sure, but I feel like that's kind of the read for where we're at as a whole.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Utah State kind of having their way offensively. Logan Bonner throws for 361 yards, 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. Devin Tompkins being one of them, all conference type of caliber receiver. He had 7 catches, 176 yards. And then they also ran for 158 yards as a team. And so, it kind of summarizes the day that Hawaii had. And it's, again, we bring up the Utah State struggles because this isn't specific to this team, right? Hawaii teams have gone on the road and laid some stinkers in the past. And, the good Hawaii teams have been able to take care of business at home. They've been able to sort of rebound from some of those ugly losses on the road, and they'll get an opportunity, obviously, this coming week at San Diego State. So we've touched on a couple of phases of the football, and of course, special teams, right? And that's always something that maybe gets overlooked, something that can be a game changer. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that, Hunter, because it hasn't been great all season long, right? Multiple games with a blocked punt. The return game hasn't been too dynamic. We had the onside kick return for a touchdown by Utah State in this ball game. And then it kind of ties into the clock management deal, right? Twice Hawaii had the football near midfield. I think once just shy of midfield, once in positive territory, fourth and very manageable, right? 4th and 5 or less. They opt to take a time. They leave the offense out on the field both times.
Yep.
Once in the first half, once early in the third quarter. Both times they leave the offense on the field. It's like, okay, are they going to go for it? They opt to take a timeout instead with the play clock running down, and then they come out and punt, right? So they bring the special teams unit out there. It kind of fits into that theme. They did not go for it coming out of those timeouts, nor did they opt to just, let the play clock expire, eat the 5 yards, and then punt it away there. And so, that's 2 out of your 6 timeouts that they end up doing that for really no gain. They go for an onside kick down 13. So within 2 scores, they're making a bit of a rally here. And there was still 8 minutes and 20 seconds left. So you're over half a quarter remaining and still a lot of football game left, but they opt to go to the onside kick. It is executed very, very poorly, obviously. It results in 6 points back the other way for Utah State. And so some of these special teams issues persist. Some of these clock management issues persist. And I'm curious just kind of what that is an indication of to you, Hunter. And it's not the first time we've seen them burn timeouts early, which, some teams, I think, Pete Carroll's a guy that I watch a lot in the NFL. He burns a lot of timeouts early. His teams have done that. They've also been very successful. And so, you can give and take a little bit, but it just seems to put the team in a position where for this University of Hawaii squad, they haven't been taking advantage of some opportunities in, the special teams area. And then they've also had some pretty big blunders.
Yeah. One of the things that marks a good team is being situationally perfect. Definitely for a coaching staff, you watch teams with Tom Brady, I think back to all the years with Belichick too. In 2-minute drills, the successful ones, those teams never make situational mistakes. And by that, I mean, no false starts, no holdings, no face masks. You play conservative, clean football, and you let your playmakers try to make it happen. Special teams is not just an afterthought. If we're going to look at it metaphorically, I consider special teams kind of like the plumbing of your house. It's an ugly business. You don't really think about it, but you think about it a whole lot whenever it's not working. And we have a plumbing issue on our team right now, and we are seeing it week in and week out. We talked about it before. University of Hawaii does not actually have a special teams coach employed with our team right now. And you can see it. You can see the results of it kind of being an afterthought. I look at those timeouts with those with the punting team out there. I didn't necessarily see that, Jordan, but my read right now is it was a personnel issue. Maybe they didn't have the right guys out there. They didn't have the matchups that they wanted to. And a lot of that comes down to not having a special teams coach on the sideline, because you're pulling from guys both on offense and on defense. And so when you're on the sideline, you're thinking about your position, what you need to do. You're not always thinking about special teams. That's why you need that special teams coach in your ear going, hey, you're going out there for punt return. You're going out there for punt block, kickoff, what have you. You need that guy who that is his job. And when you don't have that, you're going to start to see results the way that we have this year. And us as Hawaii football fans aren't used to having subpar special teams. That's something we've really leaned on in our history.
Yeah, anybody who's been on a football sideline, right? It is chaos at times, and the more orderly you can make it, or the best way you can kind of keep things organized, can go a long, long way. That is for sure. All right, that'll do it for us here in the first half. Second half, we'll get into some of the San Diego State talk and some of the things coming up ahead this weekend for the University of Hawaii. But before we hit halftime, wanted to tell everybody about amazing new supplement, astaxanthin. That's right. Doctors, pharmacists recommend it for everything from joint and muscle function to cholesterol health and cognitive function. We're talking anti-aging, and only one brand delivers 3 times more astaxanthin to your body, making it a much better option than any of the other competition, that is. Introducing Xanthicin. That's right. Available at getxantho.com. You can get it at Newtown Square Pharmacy, Down to Earth in Kaka'ako, and Pharmacare Hawaii. Learn more at getxantho.com.
This is Hawai'i Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
All right, time for the second half here on Hawai'i Football Now, presented by Xanthicin. All right, Hunter, San Diego State coming up this weekend, a huge opportunity for the University of Hawaii football program. Not only is it the first home game on campus in front of a capacity crowd, Hawaii is getting a nationally ranked opponent for that game here in San Diego State just earlier today as we record this on Tuesday, even though this episode coming out on Thursday. San Diego State ranked 24th in the initial college football playoff committee rankings, even though they lost to Fresno State. Fresno State ranked basically a spot ahead of them at 23. San Diego State 7-1 on the season, 3-1 in Mountain West Conference play. We mentioned that crucial loss to Fresno State just last weekend puts the Bulldogs in the driver's seat. Aztecs wins against Utah, at Arizona, a couple of Pac-12 scalps on their resume, but lost last week by 10 against Fresno State. What are you expecting, Hunter? This is the first capacity crowd. What are you expecting environment-wise, and what are you expecting as a response from this Hawaii team coming off of the tough loss?
First of all, I just like the fact that 4-1 with Fresno is because of us. That's just so much fun to me. That their one blemish on the year came at home against University of Hawaii. Us at home. It's just that just makes me smile as a former player because we hate those guys. But this weekend against San Diego State, couldn't be more thrilled. A lot of my buddies that haven't had the opportunity to come to the game, and then a lot of the season ticket holders that I know of that have always just, made little jabs at me like, man, you're so lucky you're part of the media to get to go down and watch Hawaii football. We've been starving for live sports, Jordan. So just the fact that we get a capacity crowd again is fantastic. And then on top of that we get a nationally ranked conference opponent in San Diego State. It's just kind of the cherry on top, man. Let's see what we got. And with the situation for us trying to battle our way back into bowl contention, we need every opportunity that we can get our hands on from this moment forward to the end of the season. Yeah, they're a nationally ranked opponent, but if I'm in that locker room, we've done it before. We weren't supposed to beat Fresno. Somehow we got it done. This team, though it may not be conventional the way that we've gone about things. I mean, we're gritty. We band together. We fight. There's sand to these guys, and I really appreciate the way they play. And I know they're going to bring it on Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Hawaii's staring at a possibility of needing to go 3-1 the rest of the way to get to bowl eligibility. We mentioned San Diego State this week. They go on the road at 0-8 UNLV. It's always a little bit of a rivalry game. UNLV could still be searching for their first win. They've been very close and very competitive, including against that Utah State squad that just kind of blew out Hawaii this past weekend. And so you got a desperate, hungry UNLV team still waiting on the schedule. You got a home game, the final home game, November 20th against Colorado State, who is 3-5, 2-2 in conference. They could very well be fighting for bowl eligibility as well come the final 2 weeks of the regular season. And then they wrap up with a trip Thanksgiving weekend to Laramie at Wyoming. Wyoming 4-0 to start the season. They've long lost 4 consecutive games, so they sit at 4-4, 0-4 in the Mountain West Conference. They very well could be at maybe 5-6 going into that game, needing a win against the University of Hawaii. So you're staring at a possibility of facing teams very desperate for a win down the stretch when you maybe even be in a position where you are clawing for your season and for your playoff or bowl hopes, bowl eligibility. And so, look, if you beat San Diego State, you upset the Aztecs, that makes things a little less stressful down the end because you're not looking at a possibility of having to go 3-0 and run the table to get into a bowl game. So I guess my question to you, Hunter, can they do it? Can they win 3 of the last 4 and get into the, what would likely be the Hawaii Bowl come Christmas time?
I mean, I'm optimistic. I really, at least this year, felt like we've played differently at home than we do on the road. We've had some good competition come in here. We've also had some subpar competition come in here. And for the most part, we've handled business. Obviously, I'd like to have the San Jose game back. But as long as we still have games in front of us, I'm a competitor as well as the rest of those guys in the locker room. I couldn't look them in the eye if I didn't say that we didn't have a chance, because I know all of them are saying, hell yeah, we've got a shot. As long as there's breath in our lungs and we've got an opportunity, let's see what happens. But it is going to be steep. That is what I will say. You nailed it on the head. Even though UNLV is technically 0-8, mark my words, that game's going to be a lot closer than what we would care to hope for. It always is going to Vegas. It's the ninth island. They seem to always have our number. That always seems to be a game that's way too close for comfort. Colorado State's always tough to beat. And then Wyoming, our last game of the season in the cold, in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, that's always tough beating them. We were talking about tough road wins. It's always tough going to Wyoming, especially late in the year. That is prime cold winter conditions. And we are not necessarily used to that in Hawaii. So yeah, it is possible. We're going to have our work cut out for us though. So if we could perhaps, oh my goodness, steal one this weekend against the Aztecs, we will be doing ourselves a tremendous favor.
Yeah, late November in Laramie, Wyoming doesn't sound like the most pleasant setting to play college football. No. Might be a little cold for the squad when they go up there, but it may come down to the final week, and that's something that this University of Hawaii football program has seen over the course of its history. You know, there've been a few years where that bowl eligibility has come down to the last game, particularly with the 13 game setup for Hawaii, and then the way that their schedule breaks down. Just a couple of quick notes for the listeners out there. Just want to remind everybody, if you are indeed going to the game and attending as one of those 9,000 lucky folks or so, make sure you download that Lumicite Hawaii app. It is paramount that you get your vaccination records and the health check and all those kind of things. And so you got to get some paperwork in. Sometimes it takes, more than a day or so to process. So you want to make sure you get that in as soon as possible. We know that this episode comes out on Thursday, so it's only a couple of days until the University of Hawaii game. But make sure you do that. And if you are not going to the game, there is a viewing party out at Wet and Wild on the west side. There will be giveaways, including a pair of tickets to the final home game against Colorado State. So I think Hunter's going to the game, but if in case you can't make it, Hunter, you got a little viewing party out at Wet and Wild under the lights.
I might be riding the shaka while I'm watching the Bows.
There you go. Right. It might be a good way to celebrate a couple of touchdowns or something like that. Stiff test though for Hawaii, no doubt about it. It's going to be a great atmosphere. I think it really will be. I think a lot of folks are going to rally around this team. I think you'll see a spirited, renewed fight from this group, even coming off of the loss. But San Diego State, man, it is back to Brady Hoke as the head coach after all those years with Rocky Long leading the way, taking over for Brady Hoke all those years ago. And it is carbon copy. They score 29 points a game. They only give up 17.5. They rush for over 200 yards a game. They only give up 92. Greg Bell is the latest lead back, right? We all the guys, Donnell Pumphrey and Rashad Penny, and you go back to Marshall Falk and everybody in between. He's leading the way. He's got 83 yards a game, 6 touchdowns, averages just under 5 a carry. They don't throw the ball all that well. They throw it for only 137 yards a game, but they only give up 212 yards passing through the air, right? They only allow 305 total yards a game, which is pretty darn impressive for Division I football in 2021. And so this Hawaii team's got a stiff test, but it is one that you face just about every time against San Diego State. And I think, they can match up well, right? It's kind of strength on strength, particularly if Hawaii gets back to that rushing attack. And it's so funny because they're sort of kindred spirits in a sense, right? You remember San Diego State is playing at Dignity Health Sports Park, which used to be the Home Depot Center, which used to be something else as well. It's in Carson, which is basically Los Angeles. It's 115 miles away from their home campus, where they are building an on-campus facility after all those years playing at Qualcomm. off campus, right? Very similar situation to Hawaii playing at Aloha Stadium all those years and without a home. They are building out on campus. That could be the future for the University of Hawaii. There were clearly more Fresno State fans there yesterday, or not yesterday, but last week in Carson than there were San Diego State fans. So there's a little bit of a parallel between these two programs, sort of lost souls, if you will. But here they are meeting at Ching in the first ever full capacity game on campus. There are a lot of weird, sort of strange storylines that led us down this path that got Hawaii and San Diego State to this ball game. But all being said, right, we talked about some of the negatives coming out of that Utah State game, but I really do think it's going to be a great atmosphere. And if this Hawaii team can play like we have seen with that rushing attack and a defense, a lot of the similar recipes to the Fresno State win, I think they got a shot here.
Yes. The number one thing that you have to do against San Diego State is hold on to the football, because they are not a team that will allow for a lot of mistakes. And so you need to do everything on your part to handle business, as to kind of get the leg up, in that sort of an argument there. Just time and time again, they are very, very disciplined, top to bottom. I mean, they're in the top three, in my opinion, of teams in the Mountain West, them, Air Force, and Boise. Just the way that they conduct their business, the way that they go about playing football, even the way they warm up, everybody is very, very focused. You never see a whole lot of unsportsmanlike conduct penalties from San Diego State. It's a culture of excellence over there. And it's possible. I think you're exactly right. It's going to need to be done in the trenches. I'm optimistic that our ground game can make a rebound after a very subpar performance against Utah State. And let the running game open up the passing attack. We got to see a little bit of that last home game, and I'm optimistic, Jordan. But it'll be a tough test. I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun ahead of Saturday. If you're listening to us on Thursday here this week, we do want to remind everybody that coming up 6:00 tonight, again, this is Thursday, in the lead up to the San Diego State game, there is a Call the Coach episode over at Ruby Tuesday Moanalua. Coach Todd Graham, our guy Bobby Curran, will be hosting that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had that on their radar as well as we look forward to this San Diego State matchup coming up this week. All right, we'll kind of put a wrapper on the University of Hawaii talk. Wanted to get into our overtime segment and give us a nice little buffer here, Hunter, because we talked about the college football playoff rankings that were initially put out by the committee today as we record this on Thursday the 2nd. And we mentioned the two Mountain West Conference teams that are ranked, but we wanted to kind of get into, or at least I did, the top end of the rankings, right? Yes. Georgia, Alabama, Michigan State, Oregon. That's your top four, right? So if the playoffs were today, those would be the top four. Ohio State sits at 5, and then Cincinnati is 6. Cincinnati is second in the AP poll, basically sort of consensus in the traditional polls, but the committee puts them at 6, which they've got to win over 10th ranked in their polls, 10th ranked Notre Dame. There is a whole lot of Big Ten and SEC teams ranked in this thing, including some teams that are in the teens like Mississippi State, which I don't understand. There's a Minnesota team ranked in there that's sort of buffing up Ohio State. And it just doesn't add up to me that a Cincinnati team that is still undefeated is behind 3 one-loss teams, and they've got a win over a top 10 team on the road at Notre Dame. And so it's just kind of leads you again down the road. We'll have this conversation as it goes. But ultimately, the signal is they need help, which at this point in the season, I didn't think that they would need help with what they have done up to this point, still undefeated. And so if they win out, they might not get into the playoff, which is kind of a shame because I think that Cincinnati team with that defense and Luke Fickell is pretty darn good. But any thoughts, Hunter, on what we saw from the CFP committee and all their infinite wisdom after this afternoon?
Yeah, a few. Cincinnati is obviously getting snubbed here. They not only beat Notre Dame at home, they beat them soundly. I was very impressed with that win against Notre Dame earlier in the year. It brings up the question again that we've been talking about since the college football playoffs inception. Why can't we go to 8 teams? Why can't we do something similar to basketball and let these guys settle it out bracket style for the last couple of games of the year? But then obviously it comes down to money. You look at the teams that are in the top 6 right there. Oregon, Ohio State, obviously, Bama and Georgia in the top 4, but those other 2 right there, those are 2 of the largest grossing athletic budgets in the entire nation right there. And so say what you will, that plays a role. That plays a role in all of this. I will say, though, there were some elements that I thought that they got right. I appreciate that they've left Oklahoma out of that top 4. In a lot of ways, they've kind of given Oklahoma the nod in the last few years. I have a brother at Oklahoma right now, and we talk as a family all the time. That is a weak 9-0 team. They have gotten lucky to remain unscathed throughout this season. And when they play Oklahoma State at the end of the year, it is going to be a war, because that's going to be a really fun one to watch. But a lot of stuff still yet to be proven right here. I love that Michigan State beat Michigan. A lot of fun stuff happening in the Big Ten that really hasn't happened before. Michigan's a good ball club. I would love to see them beat Ohio State. And if that's the case, Michigan State will probably end up having to play Ohio State. If not in regular season, I haven't checked their schedule, but definitely in the Big Ten championship. So there's a lot still yet to be handled right here. Georgia's going to have to play Alabama. There's a lot still to be done. And so Bearcat fans out there, Cincinnati Bearcat fans, it's not over yet. And for schools like us in Hawaii, the group of 5, we are cheering for you. We're with you guys. You guys are our long lost cousins.
Yeah, without a doubt. They're bailing. They're going to the Big 12 eventually, but while you're still one of the group of 5ers, we're definitely behind you there. And you're right. I'm totally with you. There is a lot of football left, and things are going to shake out in all kinds of crazy ways over the next 5 weeks or so before we get into those conference championship games and figure out exactly what the playoff is going to look like. Yeah, and Hunter, did you want to add anything in as we wrap up this overtime segment? Kind of, I'll give you the last word here.
Oh man, let's go Braves. The night that we're recording this is actually Tuesday, and we just got word that they beat the Houston Astros 7-0 in Game 6. For anyone loosely following baseball these days, the world of baseball is kind of united against the Houston Astros. And so it was awfully easy to root for the Atlanta Braves, and they got it done really well. So, looking forward to what is in store for this weekend in college football. And man, Jordan, also bummer Derrick Henry went down, because I had him in all 4 of my fantasy teams. All 4.
That is first of all, that's some impressive maneuvering to get him on all 4 of your teams. But yeah, that's brutal.
Man. Oh man. Yeah. I either had first 3, or I think he dropped as low as 5. I think people just lick their chops whenever they see Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara, or maybe even someone like, he's off the tip of my tongue, Green Bay Packers wide out, Devontae Adams. And I'm like, I got to roll with King Henry. He gets 40 carries a game. And, that's exactly what happened. If you give someone 40 carries, you're going to break down eventually. We're only human. So, not sure what I'm going to do fantasy wise. Hopefully I can scrape together some stuff before playoffs, but I'm in trouble.
Yeah, man, that I feel for you. It was working out great through the first 8 weeks or so of the season. For more of Hunter's fantasy football plights, make sure you follow him all around athlete. You got me at Jordan Helle. Big mahalos to our guy Keegan for producing this and putting it all together. Again, mahalos to our sponsors as well, Xanthison and Spectrum Mobile. We'll sign this episode off. It's been another episode of Hawai'i Football Now. We will catch everybody again next week. And if you're going to the game, enjoy the contest. Hope it's a great crowd over there at Ching. Aloha, everybody.
You've been listening to Hawai'i Football Now with Jordan Helle and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.